In this video, we're going to be taking a look at how we can create the hex screws for our knife project. So I'm going to go into the Geo folder, and I've got this folder called Hex Screws, and I'll show you the different pieces that I've made for this. So I'm going to just select this and tap F so we can kind of zoom into here. So it's probably a bit overkill to have the threads in here, but I just went ahead and added it anyways, and I can show you a tool that is useful inside of Maya for being able to create stuff like that. The other shape that I can show you is this base shape that we have here, and then we've got this shape for the actual hex thing. So let's just turn wireframe on shaded right here, tap 5, and you can see the geo that was created for this. So I'm going to talk to you about the different pieces and how we can create these, and so let's get going on this. The first thing is I'm going to take a polygon sphere, and I'm going to turn this into this shape that you see here like this. So we're just going to go ahead and say create Polygon Primitives, and we'll do a sphere. I'll create one. Depending on the size, it could be a bit too large. I'm going to do the subdivision on here. I'll do 60. Actually, I'll do 8. I'll do 8 like this, and this will give us something like we see here. If we tap 3 for this, we'll get something that's like this. And then what I can do is tap 1, I'll tap F9 to get all my verts that we see here, and I'll move it up, and I'll hold down V while I drag up, and it'll snap it to these points here. Now, if that didn't happen to you, it's probably because if you go under the move settings, the move and snap settings, you might have this retain component spacing on. So if that was on, I'm going to hit undo real quick. You can see if I hold down V, it will snap, but it's going to move that whole thing together as this component spacing this got going on there. So I'm going to hold down V and just click here and then tap it through there like that, right? And then now I can hit F10, maybe scale this thing up just a little bit like this. Maybe I want my faces for this. So an easy way of grabbing all the faces that you see here is if we select a vert like that, and you can convert a selection from one selection type into another. So if I convert this one vert that I got selected into faces, this one vert touches all these different faces. So watch what happens. I hit Control F11 instead of F11, and that will convert that vert selection into a face selection. So it selects all those faces for me pretty easily. Now if I put it on the Move tool, I can move this thing down, and I can hit Shift, right click, and we can extrude. The other thing we can do is if you hold down just Shift while you're in the Move tool, see how it says extrude? You can actually just extrude that down. So that could be pretty handy too. Now I'm going to tap 3 for this thing. And you see what we got here. We're basically going to take these edges in through here, right there, and right here. And I think I want to take these two, and I'll shift right click and say crease tool, crease it, tap 3, and you can see what we're starting to get here for this. So that's looking pretty cool. I can crease this one too, and then maybe move this one down like this. And if I hold down V, I could snap this right to this point right there, so it's nice and flat. And then if I hit F9, I could take this center part and I could pull it in and make kind of a dip kind of mark in through there. So let me turn off the wireframe on shaded just so we can see this thing. And I'm gonna move this out of position, maybe scale it down a little bit, try to get it roughly to about the right size. I'm just gonna get this closer so we can kind of compare the geo, so I can kind of remember what it is that I created for this thing. So I'm gonna get it right about there, move it here, and then now I'll turn wireframe on shaded again to kind of see this. Okay, so I need maybe another split in through here. So what I could do is I could select these edges here like this, shift right click, and I can bevel that, and that would give me some more geo that I would need right there for this. I also need a split going through here, so we could use the modeling toolkit, get to the multi-cut tool, or go into object mode, shift right click, multi-cut tool, hold down Control, and just add that there like that. And so I think we're getting pretty close. I don't think this necessarily matters all that much under the bottom of this thing like that. So I'll tap 3 and we can start to see what we got going on here. So I'm going to select these, shift right click, use the crease tool, crease this up, crease this and through here, just like that. And let's hit F9 and I'm going to grow a selection out. So I'll hit Shift and this arrow key. That is, if you see the comma key and the period key, use the period key right next to the question mark, and that'll grow your selection out like that. And that comes in nice and handy sometimes. So I'll drag this down like this, and you can see we're starting to get this nice kind of rounding. I'll hit F10, and I can use this to change the angle of like the rounding of this thing. Now this, I need to scale it out just a little bit and make it kind of flat, like you see there, like that. And so then that's going to give us everything that we need for this shape here. Maybe these points, maybe I can drag them and pull them down just a little bit more like that. Okay, and I think what I need for this one too, I'm going to grow my selection out like this one and then scale this out a bit like this. And then let's just grow the selection out for this one too, and pull it out this way, and then move it down. Now I did leave that point flat right there, so I could just snap it right there like that. And that'll give us this shape here, okay? And then so to create the hex thing, that's pretty simple. We can just go create Polygon Primitives, and we'll do a cylinder. And let's scale this thing down quite a bit, like this, and I'll rotate it. So I'll put tap E for that, hold down J to snap rotate like this. And let's go to the creation options under the channel box for this thing. So I'm just going to do 8 for this. Actually, sorry, 6, and that'll give us the hex shape that we need. Now if we move it, all we have to do is move it and hold down V, and we can snap to the center of this thing. Now I know if I'm off center from the world just because I'm kind of giving you this demonstration that you see here, and we could have this thing kind of come out just even a little bit further from this thing, kind of like that. And if I tap 3, you can see what's going to happen to this thing. So we want to get all the edges except for the inner part. So if I tap 4, if I hold down Control and drag over those edges in the center, it'll get rid of that selection there. So that's going to give me everything I need to crease. So I'll Shift right click and say Crease Tool, like that. Now I tap 3, and you can see the shape that we're going to get for that. And now we want to scale this, but we'll scrap the whole thing and scale it kind of like that. And then we need to think about insetting this thing in. The other thing I did was added this. So if you hit F9 and just drag this thing down, it starts to build some kind of roundness under the bottom of this thing, kind of like that, right? If you want another span in there, this becomes kind of a pain. Like there's nothing in here to do the multi-cut tool and just add a split in through there. What you could do, if we went to the side view, this is kind of interesting for the multi-cut tool. If we zoom in on here and we go to the multi-cut tool, you can actually take the multi-cut tool, click and drag across the object, and it'll just split it all the way through. If you hold down Shift, you can split across there like that. So that's one way of getting the geo in there. The other way of doing it is maybe taking these edges here like this and Shift right click and say bevel edge. And you want to make the fraction 0.001 like really small, and then grab edges like this and then pull it down and then scale it in. Now what I got to do is select all these, and I got to recrease them. Shift right click and say crease tool, increase that. So I'll tap 3. It just, I don't know, whenever it does the bevel, it just ruins all the creasing. So I can just drag a marquee through all this like this and then crease all that. So that'll give me that shape, and depending on how far you push this into the surface, that's going to give you your kind of boolean. So you might want to look at this in a kind of wireframe mode, kind of like this, and just kind of see how far that would actually go into the screw shape. Okay. All right. So I'm just going to take this and move this off to the side, and I'll show you the tool that I use for that. So if you go to Create Polygon Primitives and you do Helix, you get this tool, which is pretty darn cool. I'm just going to scale this thing down, try to get it roughly into the size that we're looking for, and kind of move it down into position. And if we go to the creation options for this helix, you can see that You can change the amount of coils that are on this thing. If you middle mouse drag, you can change the height of it. You can change the width of how far this thing is going to kind of stick out. You got a radius for this thing. If you drag that down, you can see how it kind of lessens that in through there. And subdivision axis. So if we take this and pull this down further to like 3, we can get something like this. So now if I play around with the radius of this a bit and play around with the width of it and change the coils maybe through there, something like that. And then the subdivision, the coil, that's how many subdivisions are up through the body of this thing. So you can get something like that. Now I could just leave the geo just like it is for this thing. So that's pretty pretty cool for a screw head or whatever. Again, you might just move it up to where you've got this thing. I wasn't so concerned about the bottom of this thing and how this thing actually forms and everything. I think it's a bit overkill, but I just thought it would be kind of cool to show you guys that as a tool. Okay. And so then, you know, we're going to push all those shapes on over to ZBrush and pushing them over. Let's take a look at what we got for this thing here, right? So using the live booleans, these are basically our shapes, and we're just doing a negative for this. This is going to stay a positive. And then once you go ahead and create this with the live boolean master, I'm going to create one. I'm just going to make it real quick and then show you what we got. Then we can take this and turn it into Dynamesh master. We could put it at 1.5 million polys, whatever. Let's run it. We'll polish it. Again, I think you know the polish exists. I'll keep saying this. Under deformation, we've got polish there. So I'm just going to run it just a bit. Get this thing nice and smooth looking and getting some nice kind of a little bit of rounding on the edges and things like that. And then we can, after it's done polishing this, we could take a look at this from far away like this. Okay, looks pretty good. And then I'm going to use decimation master. So I'm going to use this. I'm going to say preprocess current, run this. These things are going to be pretty darn small within the design, right? So we don't need this thing to be 1.5 million polys. We're going to try to drop this down to an appropriate level to where it's giving us the shape and still looks the same and everything else like that, but it doesn't have to kill the computer to have that represented, right? And so as soon as it's done, let's put on K of polys. Let's just put 10,000 polys and decimate it and see what we got. Okay, so I know I don't want to see this faceting and everything else like that. So let's try 30,000. It's getting closer, and then maybe 50. It's getting better, but again, these are going to be pretty darn small. So if that bakes for a normal map, I can do 70, maybe up that. Okay, I think it's going to look pretty good. Okay. Now the next thing I wanted to talk to you about is being able to move this within your design. So if I append it to the body, then I've got one of them. You can put it on the gizmo tool, and if you, let's just say I'm going to hold down Alt and move this thing out and rotate it and everything else like that and get it all kind of messed up. So if this gizmo tool isn't where you would want it to be, you can hold down Alt and you can click on this, looks like a map waypoint icon, and it'll put it in the middle of the object like this. If you hold down Alt and then click this, it'll reset the transformations for things. So this is nice and straight up and down, so the manipulator is going to be that way too. Now if you want to change the pivot point of where this move tool is, you can hold down Alt and you can maybe drag this thing up, and if you want to rotate it, you could hold down Alt. Anything you do with Alt is going to move kind of the pivot point for this thing. Okay, so what I've got here now is the ability to obviously move this thing around, but if I want to make a copy of this, I can hold down Control and move this, and it'll make a copy of it. So what I could do is take this and then move it wherever I want. I can hold down Control and drag these, and I can be dragging these multiple copies of this screw head, right? And so that's what I wanted to show you about at least that part. Nothing too crazy about creating these shapes or anything else that's kind of going on, but inside of ZBrush, definitely wanted you to know that you can move and move in a way that you can make copies of things, and that becomes pretty handy, right? And so if I go through the designs, might take me just a second to find which one is got all my pieces. And let's see here, this one. Okay, you can see that's what I did with all the different screws to kind of get them moved into position and to duplicate them, right? And I actually did one side, and I used the mirror and weld function to get everything that I did on the one side over. Remember, ZBrush only mirrors and welds one direction, so if you mirror and weld and your stuff disappears, then you need to use this mirror and then mirror and weld. And the reason I have that on my interface is because those two things exist in two different locations. If we go under deformation, you've got mirroring on here, right here for this, and that's where this part for the interface came from. And under geometry, if we go to modify topology, we've got mirror and weld, and they exist here. I use this stuff all the time, so that's why I put this on the interface there. So that would allow you to model anything on one side and then push it on to the other side, and then you're going to get everything that you need for your design. So that's everything I want to show you about these screws and what was made to create these different screws.